Right, I think we'll get started. So for those who don't know me, my name's Justin for IBM. I'm in the system, and today I'm chairing the session today, which is zOS 2.4 exploitation, retiring assembler modifications. The actual stream is called 4AH. And what I'm going to do now is hand it directly over to Mike Shookend. And what I would suggest, if you've got any questions, please put them through the chat box. Mike, it's over to you.
All right, is that working?
Yes, it is working.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you everyone for joining us today on this topic of getting rid of some of your assembler modifications using some new functionality in zOS 2.4. At this point, I'd probably tell you to switch off your phones, but I don't have to because you're all muted. And I'd also like to ask you to come to the front of the classroom, and you don't have to do that either. I do hope that soon I will be able to do that again. And that will, those opening sentences will become relevant once more. So a little bit about me. I've got over 30 years of MVS, OS 390, zOS, system programming. I've done a lot of capacity planning and control, performance tuning. I've done some software development in assembler language. I've even done some management. And lately, I've been doing a lot of auditing and training. My customers are your run-of-the-mill mainframe customers. I'm assuming much like the people on the call today: financial institutes, government agencies, hardware resellers, software developers, and training companies. I'm a long-time Share speaker, and I've also started volunteering for Share over the last few years. And I do core technology requirements, which makes me the guy in charge of connecting Share enhancements to the operating system with IBM, and that's what I do for Share. And I've spoken at GSE as well a few years ago. So we have 3 blocks today on the on our table. A short introduction of what I'm going to be talking about, and then the major part of this talk will be about JS2 policies, and then we have 2 smaller topics, IRR, PM, and SMF lim. I'll take a short break after JS2 policies, because I think that's probably a good place to stop and wait for questions. And then if we have any questions, I'll try and answer them to my best ability, and then we'll continue with the 2 other subjects. So, as we know, system programmers are a changing species. We are seeing younger people come into the workforce, but very few of them have got any kind of assembler programming training. And as this workforce retires, we have to start looking at the assembler code that we have in place. Now, I know that some customers have application programs with assembler code, but what I'm talking about today is the system side of things. Assembler modules that provide us a way of setting options, that provide us a way of changing the way that the operating system acts, performs according to our specifications. And obviously IBM are not blind to this retiring workforce, and probably over the last 10 years, they've been introducing more and more options to use text-driven artifacts instead of assembler code. The example that comes to mind is it's been around for quite a while, since zOS 1.12, in fact, and that's the language environment runtime options. Those of you who have been around for a while will remember that we used to have to assemble and interlink edit a module, and now there's much easier ways of doing that. You can use Palm Lab members, and you can use DD cards. So zOS 2.4 provides us with several opportunities to replace assembler code with slightly more friendlier options. I'm also going to talk a bit about zOS 2.3 and 2.2, But the main part is about JES2 policy, which came along in zOS 2.4. So JES exits have been around for a while. My first job over 30 years ago was I was one of two JES2 system programmers. With those days where you had these large groups of system programmers, and all I did was JES2 system programming, so I got to code quite a few JES2 exits. JES2 on zOS 2.2 has 60 exits. And I know that a lot of customers have several JES2 customers, several JES2 exits. And what these JES2 exits do is they provide a way of giving us the opportunity to have JES behave in a different manner to the default. It gives us a way to different phases in the JES2 processing. We can get control and do all kinds of stuff. For example, if you're still doing physical printing, then there's an exit that will help you customize your separator and put your logo on the front page. Many JES2 exits have been used to enforce naming conventions. For example, some sites force a job name to be the same to start with the user ID, and that is it can be enforced via JES2 exit. There's security concerns, there are accounting concerns that you can put into a JES2 exit. You can add messages to your job log if you like. You can change them if you like. You can change commands, add your own commands. There's 60 possible exits. You can do a lot of stuff with 60 exits. And obviously, JES2 exits are written in assembler. But not only are they written in assembler, they're written in this special flavor of assembler, which is JES2, which means that even if you do know your zOS system macros, you need to get extra training and skills to understand the JES2 macros and JES2 control blocks, which are not the same as MVS system control blocks, MVS system macros. So this is really a dying breed, anybody who knows how to code JES2. So IBM decided to use something called JSON to implement something else other than assembler. I am no JSON expert. This is straight out of Wikipedia. And the important thing that you want to take from this slide is that JSON is based on attribute value pairs. And we'll see that shortly in our first sample JES2 policy, which is written in JSON. So JSON is it's an offshoot of JavaScript, and it says here human readable, and it definitely is human readable. It's nothing like XML, for example, which can get pretty complicated. JSON is very straightforward, as we will see in a minute. So what are JES2 policies? JES2 policies are a vehicle that IBM have provided us from zOS 2.4 to replace your assembler code with JSON. And in a perfect world, we would like to see every exit replaced by some kind of JES2 policy written in JSON. And perhaps that's where IBM is going. But at the moment, there is only one type of JES2 policy, and that JES2 policy is job conversion. So this, out of the 60 odd exits that are out there, this exit could, I'll explain that in a minute, replace exits 2, 3, perhaps some implementations of exit 4. And for those of you not aware of this notation of the 252 and 353, in fact, JES2 provides several points for JCL interpretation and job interpretation, and it's just where in the JES2 processing that it happens. So there were single-digit exits like 2, 3, and 4 means that the jobs are intercepted at if they're coming in from NJE or RJE, and 52, 53, and 54, those are usually from the internal reader, like a TSO submit, or from a local scheduler. Most customers will have common code for both exits and just code both exits, and then they call the same logic, because sometimes you just want to apply the same logic whether or not wherever the job comes from. You need to watch this space. as we go to a cycle of perhaps only upgrading once in 4 years, if we skip a version, you do want to look at continuous delivery, and every quarter IBM comes out with an announcement and says what they're delivering with the latest RSU, what new features are coming in. If you're interested in JS2 policies and you want to know about further features that come in with JS2 policies, you need to look at that continuous delivery pipeline. So how does it work? It's really simple. You create a text member in a PDS, a sys3.policy, my policy in this case. It's just JSON inside, you'll see it in a minute. You define the policy library to JS2 using this command $ or $ add policylib policy01, and then you give the name of the library. It reminds me a bit of the dynamic proclib functionality that JS2 has. And once you've added a policylib statement, you import the policy using this policy import command, where you specify the name of the policylib that we've just added, and then the member in that PDS. That's it. So this is our first attempt to look at a JS2 policy. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to show you 3 different ways that you can edit JS2 policies. The preferred ways are obviously on a workstation and not on the ICF Editor, but I know that in some cases you won't have much option. It really depends on what kind of connectivity you have and what your security people allow you to do with offloading stuff from your mainframe to your PC. So this is Notepad++. Notepad++ is a freeware downloadable from Notepad++ website. Use your favorite search engine to find that out, and it'll pop up and you can download it, and it's a pretty good program. Now I'm going to be brave and try and switch over to my Notepad++ session, which is something which I will try to do. Can you all see my Notepad++, or should I ask Jeff?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay,
yeah.
So this is Notepad++. My policy example here ends with the extension JSON. So that means that Notepad++ will recognize it as JSON code. If you've just downloaded it from the mainframe and it's like a member name and you have no extension, it won't color it in this way. So what you would do is you'd go to language and ask for J and then JSON. As you can see, it's if you remember that Wikipedia definition, we were talking about attributes and value pairs. So the strings in this purple mauve kind of color are the attributes, and then the brown literals are the pairs. So let's take a look at this policy. Another thing I want to point out is that it lines up the brackets very nicely. I can expand and collapse whole bracket places, which is nice if you've got a long policy and you just want to see a certain part of it and you want to hide some of those lines. It's a very powerful editor. But let's look at this. So first of all, I have to give the policy a name. I've called it jconv1. Then comes the policy version. In our case, it's a 1. It's the only possible value. I don't know where IBM is going with this. I can guess that maybe looking forward there will be other versions, and then this will help us convert and coexist and toleration. It's just a guess. As I said, unfortunately, the only policy type supported at the moment is job conversion. I hope we see more looking ahead. And then I have a condition, and I've asked if the job priority here is less than 5. And if it is less than 5, I want to do exactly 3 actions. The first action is hold the job. The second action is modify this job. What do I want to modify? I want to modify the attribute of the job that is called job priority. And what do I want to do? I want to bump it up by 1. And then I want to send a message to the operator that job, and then job name is again an attribute that I've received from Jez, was held. So this is a really simple policy. Once I import it and enable it, then it'll do this action on all jobs that are less than a priority of 5. So that's quite a simple example. What can I ask? So in the previous slide, I asked if the job priority is smaller than 5. So what kind of things can I ask? So I can ask obvious things that I want to know about the job, like what is the job called? What is its job name? What is its job class? What is the job owner? What is the job submitter? Might not be the same thing. Does it have a system affinity? What is that system affinity? And the full list is in an active link here. But I've copied the first 5 into the handouts, and we see here already that JSON, although it's not really a programming language, it does have a lot of the characteristics of a programming language. So for example, we already see here that these attributes that we receive from JES, and like the accounting information and job class, these have they have a data type. So accounting information, as you know, is that string that comes just after the job statement keyword on your JCL, and that that comes as a list. So this is a list, a list of strings, which you can receive from within the policy. You can receive the job class. This is just a character, and then there's some logical ones here as well. For example, is the job held? Yes or no? That's true or false. And then note the column on the right, modifiable. This means later on, will I be able to modify which of these attributes will I be able to modify going back to JES? So yes, I would like to, obviously I would like to change the job class, but whether a job is held or not, well, that's not really something I can change because it's a given. It came in as held, end of story. Also, you'll note that noting job accounting information cannot be modified either. That has probably got to do with security issues, perhaps money issues. You don't want somebody to change their accounting information somehow and then perhaps not pay for the use of the computer. So those are the things, those are the attributes that I can ask. And how can I do that? Well, it's just like a language. It's got some basic characteristics of a language, like we saw. There are data types like characters and numbers and literals and character strings and logical variables. There are literals, either numeric or characters. There are operators like arithmetic operators, you know, subtraction, addition, logical operators like comparing and so forth. And there are also some functions that are built in, and the list of functions is here at the link at the bottom. But here's an example. So this is an example of the function called substring, and substring receives 3 parameters. The first parameter is a string. The second parameter is where I want to start chopping off the string from, and the third parameter is the length. So in this case, I'm taking the job name and I'm looking at the first 3 characters, and I'm comparing that to the user ID that submitted the job. That's another attribute that comes in to the policy, and then either true or false. So once I've classified a job that I want to take special care of, what can I do with it? I can cancel it, I can hold it, I can just leave the policy and let JES do whatever JES 2 does, and I can write messages to syslog, console, or both. And the most interesting thing I can do is modify a job. And what can I modify within a job? Then we have to go back to that same list of attributes. Those that are modifiable, I can change. And you can think of scheduling environment. You can think of service class, which is an interesting one. You can change the service class of a job, even though WLM might have classified it somewhere else. You can change the job priority and so forth. You can look at the list at your leisure. Let's look at what I actually did as a customer. So we're talking about exit 353. This is the job or job group segment accounting field scan. You receive the accounting field string in the exit as a parameter, and then you can do all kinds of things. In this case, what we did is we inspect the accounting information, and depending on the accounting information attributes, we are going to decide which job class to give to this job. Now, two classes are exempt. Those are for the guys with the muscle. Classes F and Z are exempt. They will go to classes F and Z. The exit just ignores the accounting information in that case. And the standard is that the first accounting field is assumed to be T followed by a number. So in this case, my job has a T00, so it adheres to the standards. And then according to the number that follows that T, I'm going to assign it a specific class. So you might ask, why do that? Why not just add class equals whatever on your job card? And it's a good question, but this has been around for a while. And it's a development system used heavily by developers, DBAs, system programmers, and the like, testers. And this would mean that they would have to go and change every single job card that they have. It's not like it's all in some library that the job scheduler is using. So we decided mainly for organizational reasons, we don't want to rock the boat too much. So we're just going to go ahead and continue to use this method, but we'll be using a policy instead of an exit. So the logic within the exit is, if it's class F or Z, then just exit. Then set the default class of L. Think long running job. Then we look at the accounting string, and we look at whatever comes after that T on the accounting string. And if it's not numeric, then you just exit and you get class L. If it's 0, set the class to Q, think quick. If it's 1, set it to S, think short. If it's anything between 1 and 20, set the class to M and then exit. So that's the logic, more or less, of the exit that we have in place. So now we're looking at the policy that I coded. Now we're using VSCode to look at it. VSCode is another free editor. It is Microsoft. It's written by Microsoft. You can download it from the Microsoft site. It's a very powerful editor, and it's become very popular in the last few years. As you can see, it also does this notation. Let's go over to my Visual Studio. If, for example, I forget this double quotation mark, you can very easily see that there's a syntax problem here. Again, it colors it nicely. Over here, you can expand and collapse certain brackets pairs. So this is this is the JSON that I developed. First thing that we've spoken about, the name and the version, the policy type. The first thing I do is ask if it's a job. Yes. Well, what do you mean if it's a job? What this means is it's not a starter task. It's not a TSO user, because obviously if it's either of those, I'm not going to give it a job class. So if it is, I just send a message, debugging purposes and display purposes. I'm going to get rid of these as soon as this becomes production, and then just leave the policy. This is for the muscle. If job class is F, send a message and leave. If job class is Z, leave the send this message and then leave. But then it gets kind of complicated, because it turns out that when the standards for this special accounting information were set down, as well as specifying T1 for class S, you could also specify T01 or T as many zeros as you like 1. So I had to start looking at ways of taking this into account. So this is my example for class S. So here is this is a function called list entry. Job account is that list of accounting informations. I'm taking the first element and I'm asking if that element is equal to T1. If it is, that I set my job class, modified job, what attribute? Job class, set it to S, print that message and leave. And here I'm doing, again, I'm taking this list entry, the same thing, but now I'm doing a match. I'm matching it. This is not exactly like an equal. This is matching a string to a wildcard mask. Normal wildcard rules prevail here. An asterisk is 0 to any number of characters, and a question mark is exactly 1 character. And I had to repeat this kind of jumping through loops for class Q, and class M was even more complicated because there's a range there. And in the end, beyond doing what I did is I went to about 2 months of SMF data, and I took a look at what people actually submitted, what they used as their accounting information, and the resulting job class, and I put all that into my policy, and that's how it grew to 160 lines, which is rather ugly. If I've missed anybody, it's not the end of the world, because what will happen is somebody's put something in their accounting information that with the exit it went to class S, for example, a short class with good priority, and instead it goes to L. So the worst thing that will happen is they'll come and complain, and they'll say, ah, yes, you're right. And I'll tell them to change the accounting information, or I will modify the policy. Either one will work. So now we're back on 3270. This is the ICF editor. There is no highlighting for JSON, as you can imagine. So the closest I found that would give me some kind of highlighting is highlighting for C. You see the command here, high C, which gives me highlighting for C language. You can see that it does some of the work, but all these strings are just white. You get none of these nice colors for the attribute and for the value. It does color the brackets, which is nice. I'm assuming that anybody on the live session is not using USA 1047 for their code page, but something else. And then you have to watch these square brackets. It's very much like anybody who's done any coding in C on the mainframe is familiar with this problem, that you get these funny, instead of getting the nice square brackets, you get other symbols. And you need to be careful of this, because when you download it to your PC, if you're using the wrong code page, then you'll get gibberish on your PC. These symbols will not be correct. You have to make sure that the left square bracket is a hexa AD and the right bracket is a hexa BD, whatever symbol shows up here. So that's just a heads up in case you use your ICF editor. So step number 1 to set up a JS2 policy is to create this member, which, like I said, has 160 lines. Most of it is actually sending messages, which I'll get rid of, when this moves to a production phase. Step 2 is add my policy lib to policy 01. So I give it the name of the data set, and I get back this nice message telling me that DD1 is now pointing to this DS name, and gives me the volso as well. And then I can do a $D or a $D policy lib command, and this is what I get back, which is pretty much the same as what I got when I did it in the first place. So that takes another 2 seconds. And then I need to import the policy. So I give it the name of the policy lib that I specified on the previous add policy command, and I give the name of the member in the data place. And then I can optionally say replace equals yes, which means that if there's already a policy with a name that's found in the JS2 job C member, it'll override it. The default is no. And then it gives me the whole story here about it being converted, and it goes to the JS2 checkpoint, it goes to the runtime repository, whatever that is. I really don't know. And then the request is complete. Okay, so that worked. But what happens if I have a syntax error in my policy? So here I've deliberately left out a missing double quote, and I'll give ICF some credit here. I'll give the editor some credit here. Is that you do see that the color here has changed. If we look at the previous slide, you'll see that all the strings are in white, whereas here the strings have changed to green. So there's something here that's telling is wrong, but I might not pick that up. So when I do import something with a syntax error, what I'll get here is a JSON parser reported the this error 109, reason code 103. You don't have to run to Google, you don't have to run to the book, because what this means is printed on the next line. Expected comma pairs between object and offset 490. What is this offset 490? This offset 490 is the offset in bytes from the beginning of the data set, or beginning of the member, which is a bit strange, but so you have to do a little bit of arithmetic. This PDS is has a record length of 80, so you divide 490 by 80, and you get 6 carry 10, so it's line 7, position 10, and it actually marks it here. It's copied this here, the actions, it's copied it, the line here, and it actually shows you where the problem is, which is okay. But if you have a long policy like I did, you might have the same line on several, you might have exactly the same line on several lines. So it's good to work exactly out where your syntax error is. So that's just a little quirk that it has. And then obviously the import fails. So what does it look like? I log on with my TSO user. I get that message that it's not a job, and it gets skipped because I'm not going to give my TSO user a job class. My TSO user is started. I submit my job. And then first of all, I set it to a default of L, and then I go and do my parsing here of what comes after the T. I find 0, I say, great, this is job class Q. I give it new job class Q, and then just to show you that I'm not pulling your leg, I display the job, and it is indeed class Q, even though it had class equals A on the job card. Some useful commands when you're dealing with
Mike,
yes.
we have a question from Alan Playford.
Is that in the chat?
Yeah, he's asking, are policies available prior to zOS 2.4 via an APR PTF?
No.
Enabling a fix?
No, they're not. As far as I know, no, they're not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question, Alan. Okay, continue.
Okay, let me just get this out of the way. Right, so we have we have these useful commands. We've seen the add policy lib. We've seen the display policy lib, which just displays the names of the data sets that I've used for my adding my policies. I can use the policy import either with replace equals yes or just take the default of no. I can display a policy name. It doesn't show a lot of information, it just shows if it's enabled or disabled. If I omit the name keyword and the comma as well, I'm going to get a list of policies that have been imported. Can you have two policies of the same type enabled? Yes, you can. Jez will call both of them. You can disable a policy and you can enable a policy. So all pretty straightforward. Coexistence. I tested coexistence with zOS 2.2. So I had the two-way multi-access spool with 2.4 on one side and 2.2 on the other side, and it all worked well. And the 2.2 was using the exit, and the 2.4 was using the policy, and that was okay. But then I stumbled across this PTF in September. That came out in September, and I'm specifying that because, as you may know, zOS 2.2 was end of support at the end of September. So this came out really late. So if you were doing your coexistence work, if you're going from 2.2 to 2.4, I'm going to guess you did your coexistence work several months ago and you never had this PTF in place. And there is a PTF for any multi-access spool members using just two policies, and it doesn't matter which level of zOS you are on. And the way that I stumbled across this PTF, I'll talk about that in a minute. Three major problems that bugged me. Problem number one was that trying to parse what came after that T on the accounting information in the exit, it was really easy. It's a pack and then it converts to binary, and then you just compare the numbers, and that's really easy in assembler. I did open an RFE for this, and if you want to be nice, you and that's an active link that'll take you to the RFE. And somebody did suggest that there's a way to do with this to do this in JSON. You have to code a little function in JSON, which will go through each member in that accounting, in each character in that string, and then turn it into a number. It's really, that's way out of my depth. My JSON is really nowhere near that. So maybe in the future I'll try that when I get my head around JSON. Problem number 2 was that after doing the add policy lib and then doing a policy import and then IPL, I saw that it did not survive the warm start, which is a bit strange. I mean, we've been adding stuff to JES2 forever, you know, changing everything with, or almost everything with JES2 behavior, and it usually survives a warm start, and it didn't. And before I opened a case at IBM, and before I started asking for another RFE, I said, let's take another look. And then I found this note up on Knowledge Center, and I hadn't seen this before. So it told me here that there's a problem with persistent storage for JES2 policies, and there's an APAR, and the PDF is available, and this is the PDF. And then when I wanted to try and install this PDF to my 2.4 system, I came up with a held PTF with action type of multi-sys telling me to install the other PTF that I spoke of earlier in my 2.2 state system. So this is just shows that this was still kind of bleeding edge here. This is teething. We still have to look at, there's still a few problems that need to be ironed out here. So you could add your $policy and $add statements to just to startup deck. You know, you can add any command that you like at the end of it, or you could use system automation to do that. But I would just wait to get the fixes in, and then perhaps this won't be needed anymore. I still have to verify that this really helps. But this had me thinking that what happens with the cold start, because I looked at the JES2 initialization and reference guide, and there's absolutely nothing to do with policies in that book. So I'm just thinking what happens after a cold start. I'm going to guess that my policies go away, and I will have to add them again using system automation. Maybe for every IPL, add a policy, a $add and a policy, with the replace equals no, and then if it's already there, it won't override it. But if it's not there because it's a cold start, then I'll do that. I haven't tried yet to do a cold start and see what happens. Cold start is traumatic enough. You don't need the extra aggravation of your jobs not being converted properly. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know. I haven't tried that out yet. And the third problem is just an irritation that there are very few samples. There's nothing in sys1 samplib. There's nothing in shast samp, which is the library where IBM ships a lot of examples for the exits. And it's just a shame that there's so few samples. There's a sample in the manual. I think it's very similar to the one that I showed you earlier, if I remember correctly. And then Tom Wasick has an excellent share presentation about the new features in JES 2.4, and part of that presentation is dedicated to this topic of policies. There's much more information there, and there's also another sample. So just to wrap things up regarding JES 2 policies, it's really easy. This JSON is just a piece of cake. It's really no problem at all. I would convert your exits if you plan to, while you at least have somebody in-house who can read assembler. Maybe not write assembler, but at least read assembler, because otherwise it's going to be a problem. Otherwise you have super duper documentation. Obviously JSON is not a versatile programming language like assembler is, so there's some things you won't be able to do in JSON. And as you can see, this is a kind of teething kind of area, and you want to keep your maintenance current, which is a good idea anyway. But if you're going to use JES 2 policies, you really want to be way up there with your RSUs. And I'm urging you to tell IBM about any missing features or policies that you'd like to see, policy types you'd like to see with exits that you're using and you want to replace.
But Mike, we have another question.
Yes, I see the question.
Okay. Do you want to answer
it? The answer is no, because forms is not part of Exit 20 is not part of the job conversion phase, as far as I remember. It's probably part of sysal's processing. I don't remember offhand what exit 20 is, but no. So if you want to get rid of that exit, go to IBM and tell them, please give us a JES2 policy conversion type that will address that area of JES2. It's very limited at the moment. Do I know if it's more coming? I really don't. It's a question for IBM. So this is the end of what I'm going to talk about, JES2 policies. This is a good time for me to catch my breath and for you to ask questions about JES2 policies.
So here's what I will do is, if anybody just raises their hand on the chat, I will unmute them. So that's the offer I'll make, so you can speak with Mike direct.
Everybody's in shock. Okay, that'll work. So we'll continue in that case. And if you remember anything moving forward, don't be afraid to put your question in the chat box. So we've got two smaller sessions now left. Two smaller subjects left. One has to do with the RACF database and RACF options. It's a new member that was shipped in zOS 2.3. The old way that we used to specify the names of the RACF database and also the range and also some RACF options were in a load module called ICH RDSNT, and there's another load module which has the range table. I didn't specify it here because I have no experience with that. So I just wanted to stick with what I had experience with. And you have to build a special load module for each RACF environment. If you have several RACF environments, then you need to change that load module, and if the names are going to change or the options are going to change. And then every time you upgrade to zOS, you need to recompile them again. And it's actually not code, it's just constants in a load module, and you probably wrap it in a user mod. So this is the old way. The first three punch statements are to wrap it nicely in a user mod. And then we just have some defined constants here. There's a defined constant for the primary RACF database, there's a defined constant for the secondary RACF database, and there's a bit string here, and each bit, well, some of them are reserved. 4 of them are reserved, and another 4 are things that you can set if you want to set these specific options, which I'm not going to go into because I'm not a huge RACF expert, but it's just something the system programmer would do, where each time you upgrade your zOS. So that's the old way. Create a user mod, compile, link, assemble, link edit, or bind, as it's called nowadays. And the new way to do it is, there's a new member in PalmLib called IRRPRM XS. You specify RACF equals XX in your IEA-sys member, and then it'll pick up the IRRPRM with the correct suffix. Very standard. There is a sample, this is one sample, a lot of comments inside, which explains what everything means, which is very nice, and it's been available since 2.3. And this is what I've done is I've taken the member and I've chucked out all the comments, or nearly all the comments, and then this is what it looks like. So it's just text with your primary data set and your backup data sets. Up at the top, those bits are set by using keywords, and it's obviously explained very well in the initialization and tuning guide and reference, and it's no brainer. It was very easy to implement. The coexistence was fine. So my 2.2 was looking at the ICRN DSD, and the 2.4 was looking at the member. But in a shared PalmLib environment, I've got must have done this late last night because I've got an error there. It's just environment. But in the shared PalmLib environment, you need to watch your IEA-sys, because if you leave RACF equals 0, on a 2.2 system, it's going to come to a grinding halt. And there are several ways of getting around this. I personally prefer to have a bit of logic in my load member, and then if it's LPAR1, use an additional syspalm, a member or IASys member with rack. All it has there is rackf equals 00, and then slowly, as you move all your members over to zOS 2.4, all your Syspex members, then you point them all in the right direction. That's how I would do it. If you have operators on site, and just tell them to press enter. And there's a link to the Knowledge Center down here, the 2.3 version of it. Very simple, not a lot to say here. And SMF-lim-XX is something I do not have any personal experience with. It's not that new, but I thought so that I would give you at least close to your hour's worth value of presentation. I thought I'd add this here in as well, because it's a related topic. So the old way that for virtual storage management is using an access called IEF USI. Why would we want to do that? We might want to add virtual storage to some job steps to avoid them crashing on virtual storage shortage. We might want to restrict other jobs that don't use too much virtual storage. I also want to provide reasonable defaults. Some of the JCL that is still generated today, for example, ISMF, you can generate DFDSS JCL from ISMF. It's still the step still has some ridiculous region like 2 megabytes and always crashes. So if you have a decent IF USI exit, it's going to provide in decent reasonable defaults. It'll override anything that a programmer might put there, which is not so sensible. It can get quite fancy, this exit. There are a lot of options. There are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of parameters that you can take, that you get as input, and you can query them. And it needs some housekeeping. It needs some babysitting. I mean, this is perhaps going back a while, but when we moved to 64-bit, then this had to be revised, because suddenly we had above the bar storage, and we needed to take care of that as well. But other hardware and software changes also might need at least taking care of this and recompiling it for each zOS release.
Mike, can you see the question from Alan Playford?
DSN to PRM utility can create samplet from current. Is that a question, or is that what Alan is saying? If Alan is saying that, that's excellent. I didn't know that. Thank you, Alan. Not that it's very easy to, not that it's difficult to code thank you, Alan. No, that's excellent. I did not know. I did not stumble across it. Probably missed it in the upgrade workflow. But anyway, that's great news. But anyway, it's not such a difficult member to code. But thank you. That's good news. So SMF-Lim was introduced in zOS 2.2. It's been enhanced to 2.3 and 2.4. There are extra security controls in 2.4, and there are improved defaults in 2.4. As always, there's a SMF-Lim equals XX statement in IASys. You use filters to qualify the jobs that you want to process with this way of doing things. And then some of the common ones that you want to look at are the accounting information, and the job name, and the job class, and if it's a TSO user or JERS or starter task. And then once you've qualified a job that you want to take special care of it, you can give it region above, region below. You can cancel the job if you like, and the full details are in this link down here. And this is just I haven't implemented this. This is just an example. I did run it through a test system, so at least syntactically it's correct. So I'm providing defaults here. There's no filter on this upper statement. So everybody gets 10 megabytes below the line, 256 above the line, 128 gig above the line. But of course, I run with no limits. So that's how it would work. Reference material, well, the regular reference manuals, just installation, exits and commands, MVS initialization and tuning reference for the two smaller subjects. Tom Wasek has a great presentation on all the new gesture enhancements, and it also has a it has a sample for just 2 policies, and then Jeff explained this here in a share presentation, and he actually tested it, and there's actually a test drive there, which is pretty interesting. So you can take a look at that material. Please rate this session. I want to know if it's interesting, if there's demand for this kind of thing. It helps me, it helps the conference organizers, and definitely I would suggest that you make a contribution to this very valuable charity. It's a very important charity. And with that, if there are any questions, go ahead.
Okay, any questions? I think we've got about 10 minutes, which we can give back if we don't have any questions, but I will wait a couple of seconds. Okay. All right, Mike, I really appreciate your presentation. I certainly learned something about the number of exits in JS2, 60. So that's what my big takeaway from it. But no, thank you very much. And as Mike actually alluded, it is very important that you give the feedback. GSE and the conference thrives off the feedback to actually bring presenters like Mike back to the forum. So again, please do it. And just to remind you how you do your feedback, if you go onto the agenda, click on the place where basically you've got your Zoom. At the bottom, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a link and it'll fill in your details. So yes, please fill in, and don't forget to donate to the worthy cause. I'd like to end on a final note. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this session, which is BMC/RMS Partners. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you very much. On that note, I would like to bring this session to a close and thank everybody for attending. Hang on a minute. I think Alan has just got something.
Yeah, Alan has posted a link to where you can get that utility, which is nice, very nice. Thank you very much, Alan. And before that, there was another question about how to get the recording if you've missed this. And Jeff, perhaps you know, I do not know.
Right, so the recordings will be made available, and provided obviously the fact you're on this session, you are a registered GSE. I believe there'll be an email out to actually let people know when and where that you will get the recordings. But every session is recorded. This has been recorded, so yes, you'll be able to watch it again. So yes, we've just had a new message. Just hang on a minute. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay, no worries. And just out of interest, the maximum number of participants was 38, and we leave on 30. So I think that is very good, Mike. So you kept the attention of the audience. So well done there.
I hope so.